Kia ora! My name is Sachie and I make circus comedy shows, theater shows, music, and I am a co-producer of Down Underground, and this is my Mahi. Okay, so how I make solo shows. It seems different always, depending on what I'm working on. And so my first solo was a clown act, and I made that show back in 2005 when I was studying at Freehold Theater Lab Studio in Seattle, Washington, in the US. And so I made that show with my then clown teacher, George Lewis. What happened was I was supposed to bring in a clown trick to class, and then at the end of the course, he asked me if I would be interested in creating an act based on that clown trick. And my trick was I would open a bottle of wine while playing trumpet. So I would hold trumpet on my left hand instead of right and open a bottle of wine while playing something, standing up. So we created a narrative around that trick, and the narrative was that a clown arrives at her own surprise birthday party, but nobody's there. And she finds the audience instead. And she tried to explain to them like why she's there, what she wants to do. This is a birthday party. But she does that all in Japanese. So there's the element of lost in translation there. And so that was my first solo, but it was also my very first performance on stage outside of music. So it was very interesting for me because I learned quickly that that type of clown shows audience they do have to work for me.
Repeat after me!
Repeat after me!
No!
For that show, we had structure like a beginning, middle, and end, and we knew we had a clear through thread of where the story was going, but every night was different because different audience, they give you different response, and I react to it differently. So it was really fun, and it was very good training for me. And I got to perform that in different parts of Seattle. And so that's the first solo. Then same director, George Lewis, we became very close friends, and we created a few other things, including ensemble piece. It was also a clown piece, and then we created my full-length solo theater show, but it has elements of clowning in there. And this was different from birthday surprise clown piece, and it started as a daydream, and I didn't share it with anyone for a long time, partly because it was so personal and came out of Japanese earthquake and tsunami in 2011. And so the fantasy was that my mom lost everything, and her whole town washed away. She lost so many people, and she moved in with me in Seattle. And she was in so much pain that I wanted her to feel better, which seemed impossible at that time. And so I think that's where my daydreaming started, where she's made to feel okay and move on. So we worked on Fish Soul in 3 stages, and it took a long time because of geographical issues. I was traveling a lot, doing festivals and shows, different parts of the world, and George is based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So we both flew into Seattle for a month, and we worked for a month almost every day, and came out of that with a rough draft of script. And so often when we work together, we improvise on something, on a theme or text or image or something, and then keep the good bits and keep collecting the good bits. And then, towards the end of the process, we write everything down on index cards and spread it out and see if it forms some sort of coherent whole. And so we did that end of that first phase and wrote out a skeleton of our script. And then a year later, I went to Buenos Aires and we worked 2 months or so, working more on our feet, improvising, writing a lot. And there I met 2 ladies, Sandra Jurkovic and Andrea Totti, and they are filmmakers in Argentina, and they made me animation for the show, so that the show has this big screen in the back, and then there's animation where I interact sometimes, and then animation tells the story on its own sometimes. And so they made that from scratch. They made every single waves, they drew them by hand, and they made this giant house out of matchsticks, and they did old-fashioned stop-motion animation technique thing. And then I made a costume made, and pretty much everything was set to go when my mom got really sick in Japan. So I went back to Japan, took 48 hours to fly there, and spent a month and a half in Japan, which coincided with 7th anniversary of tsunami. And so I had a very moving, special time there, taking care of my mom. When she got kind of better, I went back to Buenos Aires and we worked 4 more weeks there. So that was a phase 3. And the interesting thing was that after that experience in Japan, spending a month and a half there, changed the course of the show a little bit. Definitely, actually, not a little bit, but a lot. There were questions that we were asking ourselves for a long time, which kind of solved itself when I went back to Buenos Aires. And we made change in script, in the story, in the character, and and then eventually kind of finished it with putting music. I write music for my shows, so put the music and talked about lightings and so that's how we made the full-length show. So it's different, even when I work with the same people like George, process could be different, vastly different. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I like doing when I'm creating a show. Thanks! That was my Tahi Mahi.